Good afternoon and welcome to another Research in Action brought to you by the Division of Research at Florida Atlantic University. My name is Karen Scapinato. I will be today's moderator. Before we get started, as always, a few reminders. We do want your questions and we're going to try and answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation today. In order to submit your questions, please hover your mouse in the bottom of your screen. You see a Q&A button. If you push on that, a little pop-up will come up and you can type your question there. You can type your question at any time during the presentation. As I mentioned, we will go through as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Should we run out of time, we will ask today's presenter to address the remaining questions offline, and we will post the answers on our website. With this, it is a very great pleasure to introduce today's speaker. If you're a regular at our Research in Action series, you may have seen him before, so he doesn't really need introductions. For those of you who are new, Dr. DeDonno has a Ph.D. in psychology from Case Western Reserve University. He also has an MBA in finance and an MA. And Dr. DeDonno has previously worked with the US military in optimizing soldiers' cognitive performance. He has worked with behavioral hospitals. He has given presentations at major psychological and statistics conferences, and on and on and on. Dr. DeDonno is currently an associate professor at Florida Atlantic University and teaches research methodology and statistics. His primary appointment is in the College of Education, but he also holds a secondary appointment in the College of Medicine and is an affiliate faculty in the College of Nursing and an adjunct faculty in the College of Business. As you can tell, he is very busy and has a very all-around talent here. So today we're welcoming him back to talk about the fountain of youth. Mike.
Thank you, Karen, very much. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started here. Okay. And let's see here, optimize, share, and slideshow from the beginning. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining me this afternoon. I'm excited about this presentation. As Dr. Scarpinato had mentioned, I teach research methodology and statistics. Not always the favorite courses for my students, but this is a fun topic. This is just an investigation that I kind of undertook over the past few years of something that's always interested me. And it's really in that area of searching for that fountain of youth, and does it really exist? So let's get started. But for today, what we're really going to talk about is the search of the fountain of youth. And I think about this in four areas. First, the quest for youth. When did the search begin? And I also want to talk about the present day search, and then finding the fountain of youth. With all the information I'm going to share with you this afternoon, it really comes from evidence-based research. So much of this information, and I'll be referencing the researchers who have conducted this, is not coming from Facebook or Instagram or what you might find on Google. Much of the evidence is from evidence-based research. This is researchers in academia and institutions that are conducting research in a non-biased way, really trying to find answers to really important questions. We apply the scientific method, which you can see here on the screen, which is really observation, question, hypothesize, conduct an experiment, analyze, and then draw conclusions from that information. So much of what you're going to see here is evidence-based. So when I started looking into this quest for youth, I started looking at it from a historical viewpoint and trying to think of how do we feel about youth, and what are some of the thoughts relative to it? And I found some interesting quotes here. You can see here from Mark Twain. He stated that life would be infinitely happier if we could only be born at the age 80 and gradually approach 18. The Greek poet Homer has referenced aging to being loathsome. When we think about aging, William Shakespeare really calls it a hideous winter. So we have these historically negative viewpoints of aging, and that's really what brought into the search for the fountain of youth. Thinking back, where did it begin? I have found evidence back to the 4th century BC. Alexander the Great was said to have come across a healing river of paradise. In the Middle Ages, there was a mythical king, Preston John, whose kingdom allegedly contained a fountain of youth and a river of gold. So this is not a new search. This has been a search that we have essentially through the entire existence of humankind been searching for. More recently, though, many of us would be thinking of Ponce de Leon. He's a person that we always think of as searching for the fountain of youth. Now, what you're going to find out throughout this presentation is most likely he wasn't even searching for the fountain of youth. He was actually searching for gold and money and things that he could transfer or barter with. The story of the search for a fountain of youth actually was created after for various reasons, which I'll share with you in a moment. Being in Florida, it's wonderful that we have a city up north from here, Boca Raton, called St. Augustine. It's a great location to check out. They have what they believe is a fountain of youth where Ponce de Leon founded it. You can actually go swimming in the water and supposedly have some youthful effects occurring from it. But before we get there, let's watch a brief video of some of the history of the fountain of youth.
For most of our history, Fountain of Youth, a magical body of water with the power to cure illness and reverse the aging process. But does it really exist? Sorry to disappoint, but probably not. Stories of the Fountain of Youth go back at least as far as the 5th century BC and the writings of the Greek historian Herodotus. Even Alexander the Great of Macedonia was said to have been looking for a river to turn back time when he conquered the Persian Empire. Flash forward to the Middle Ages, when Europeans believed that a ruler named Prester John presided over a far eastern kingdom that contained not only a fountain of youth, but a river of gold. But by far, the most famous searcher in history was the 16th century Spanish explorer, Juan Ponce de Leon. Leon joined Christopher Columbus in 1493 as part of the renowned explorer's second trip to the New World. While in the Caribbean, he may have heard rumors of a magic fountain and river said by local Taino Indians to lie somewhere north of Cuba, on an island known as Bimini. After colonizing Puerto Rico, Leon set sail for the coast of Florida in 1513, a voyage allegedly motivated by his search for Bimini and the Fountain of Youth. As the story goes, he landed near St. Augustine, where a statue of him now stands in the central square. The story about Leon's search for the Fountain of Youth may be a staple of popular history, but there's not much truth to it. Leon probably wasn't even looking for the mythical fountain on his journey to Florida. No document from the time, including letters written by Leon himself, mentions such a goal for this voyage. What he really wanted was to capture land and resources, especially gold, for Spain. And it seems likely that later Spanish writers made up the Fountain of Youth story after his death, in order to portray him as foolish and gullible. That doesn't stop tens of thousands of visitors from visiting St. Augustine's Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park, a tourist attraction that has been open at least since 1901. So far, though, no one has ever gotten any younger from exposure to the sulfur-smelling waters of its natural spring. Whether it's a magic anti-aging cream or a miracle cure, many people haven't given up searching for the equivalent of the Fountain of Youth. But if history is any guide, they'll be looking for a very long time.
So what you see here is certainly there's a history of looking for the fountain of youth. And what we now look at too is more the present day. And I just came across a handful of companies that are actually doing work specifically in the area of aging. For example, here you have Calico. This is essentially a pharmaceutical research company. They focus on health and well-being, and particular challenge of the aging and associated diseases was Google's co-founder Larry Page. Human Longevity, Inc., another organization that is exploring this. In fact, you can go to Human Longevity, Inc., and you can join and become a member of their organization. They provide a number of health services, concierge physicians, and other things that could really, in essence, optimize your health, or at least that's what they would be promoting. It costs somewhere between $5,000 at a minimum up to $20,000 to become a member. They're based out of San Diego, California. A couple of things you might want to think about checking out. Let's think about some evidence, though, when we look at the the present day and the search for the fountain of youth. This is a research study that was done out of the University in Zurich, Switzerland. And what they did is they explored the influence of genes involved in aging. And typically in this research, they use animals to explore the various phenomena. And in this one, they used a nematode zebrafish and a common mouse to explore. And what they did is they compared and isolated common genes related to aging. Out of 40,000 genes, they found 30 related to aging. Essentially, what I share here is the BCAT1 gene interacted with branched chain amino acids, resulting in increased longevity. So this is one example of a research study that has found some evidence for gene-related longevity benefits. Another one that is more recent, this was done by Cynthia Kenyon. She's actually part of Human Longevity, Inc. And they demonstrated that a single base pair alteration or mutation in a gene, DAF2 in C, algae worms could double their lifespan. Interestingly enough, they also found that not in addition to doubling the lifespan, the worms actually lived longer, but also looked younger and healthier. Now, I don't know how you would do a comparison between worms healthy looking, but this is what the evidence has found. And I do have a reference for that right on the screen here, and I'm happy to share these references with you if you'd like to look at them a little bit closer. But when I look at this, I start wondering, are we focusing too much on age? Much of what we look at is thinking about age and going back to our youthful time. But the question really is, should it be about longevity? Here you see an average lifespan expectancy through history. Cro-Magnon area 18, the Renaissance average age was 30. America today, the average life expectancy is 78. There is an estimate here that by the year 2300, life expectancy is going to be 101. So in my viewpoint, if there's no fountain of youth, then we need to change the search parameter. We need to look at this from a different way. In my viewpoint, we want to start thinking about longevity. And the first thing I would ask for you to think about is, what does longevity mean to you? Just take a moment to think about that. What does longevity mean to you? Certainly, if we think about it, does it mean lifespan? Well, I want to live as long as I can. I want to live till I'm 100. But what about lifespan and health? I mean, you don't want to live longer, but you want to be healthy as you live longer, right? It's not just the age, but it's a healthy age. We can even say lifespan plus health plus a purpose. So I'm living longer, I have good health, but I also have a purpose. In the mornings I wake up, I have a purpose. I'm going to share with you some information from Viktor Frankl, a famous neurologist who was a Holocaust survivor who wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he really talks about an important factor in life is to have purpose, not just exist, but have a purpose, a reason for waking up in the morning. So maybe we want to think about that, building that into this definition of longevity. We can even take it steps further, contentment, friendship, love, service, feeling safe, right? We would certainly want to feel safe in the environment that we're in. So when we think about this, it's really much larger than just youth. It's really a whole set of factors that we want to think about, maybe a quality of life, if you will, that we want to start thinking about. Quality of life is not new. Here's a research study done by Nicotinamide in 2006. And what the researchers did is they took a look at quality of life over a lifespan, typically in older adulthood. And what you see here on this screen is on the horizontal bar, you have ages from 50 to 100. And then on the vertical bar, you have the quality of life, the CAS-19, which is essentially a quality of life scale. Higher scores on the scale suggest that you have a higher quality of life. And what you see here is a graph of the scores over time. And I think what's important here is if you look at this graph, you really are peaking out somewhere between early 60s, and you're really maintaining that through 80, maybe even early 80s. You really don't starting to see a drop off until mid 80s. So from a quality of life standpoint, it seems to really last for a long period of time. What we find is typically people who view themselves having a quality of life, no matter what challenges they have in their life, typically their quality of life is high. Now, they may have instances where it drops significantly, a loss of a loved one, for example, a serious injury, but over time, their quality of life does seem to stabilize back to where it was pre-accident or pre-loss of a loved one. So in my mind, when I think about this, while the evidence suggests that the fountain of youth is in our genes, I believe the fountain of youth also exists within our mind, and it's an action. And here's some examples I want to share with you. So first, Viktor Frankl, as I just mentioned a minute ago, he has some very powerful statements. As you may know, he is a neurologist, psychiatrist. In Germany. He spent time in concentration camps. He was able to predict survivors from concentration camps. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, is a very powerful book. I just pulled a couple quotes out of his book. The first one here, as you can see, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Another one that I thought was powerful was between stimulus and response, there is a gap or a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and or freedom. So in both of these examples, it really talks about our viewpoint of the situation. How am I seeing this current situation? You have a bad situation in front of you. How am I viewing it? In one of his examples, which I thought was very powerful, he was speaking that he was on a train loaded with prisoners, and they were being taken to another camp. And he noticed that he was able to see between the wood cracks on the train, the boxcar that they were stuck in. And he was able to look through one of the cracks and he saw sunrise. And he said, you know, they can take everything from me, but they can't take this moment of beauty. I thought that's a very powerful statement that I think is important when we think about fountain of youth being within our mind. Another wonderful quote is from Stanley Kunitz, American poet. He was a 10th poet laureate in the United States in 2006 or 2000. He has a great quote: "The ability to stay alive in both senses has to be in part a matter of good fortune, the right genes and antibodies, but will and motivation also count." Now, what we might be mindful of is we can't control our genes, right? That's something that we are born with for the most part. But we can control will and motivation. And in my opinion, that's where we put our emphasis, focusing on what we can change. So follow the path to the fountain of youth. And this is the path to the fountain of youth from my viewpoint. First, as I mentioned, it's within our mind and it's an action. So the first thing I want to share is the path to the fountain of youth is positive self-talk. We can be our own worst enemy. We oftentimes are the most negative person to ourselves. We tell ourselves, we're not that smart, or I'm just not that good, or I'm just not going to do well on this test, or I'm just too heavy, or I don't look good, or I'm not tall enough. I'm not going to do well on this test. I'm not going to do well on this job interview. We're our own worst enemy. Positive self-talk is the change of that talk from negative to positive. And we talk to ourselves a lot. There's evidence that we talk to ourselves upwards of 700 to 1,000 words a minute. Now, these aren't full words, but these are feelings. These are thoughts in our mind about how we feel, how we are perceiving ourselves. If that talk is more negative, we tend to underperform. If that talk is more positive, we tend to overperform or perform at our maximum. So the first path on this, or step on this path, is positive self-talk. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the health piece. There's other presentations for that, but it's an action towards physical self. We need to be mindful of not just our heart and our mind, but it's a hand-in-hand walking of these two. That's important. And I just want to share just a couple slides when we think about our health. First, know your numbers. The big four, right? Blood pressure, waist circumference, cholesterol level, and glucose. Know these numbers. Blood pressure, you can easily get a blood pressure kit right at CVS or Walgreens. Check it every night. There are apps that you can put on your iPhone you can enter your blood pressure every night. I've been doing this. I have blood pressure readings back 8-9 years that I can look at. It's an important thing to track. It's easy to do. It's one of those aspects that we can do right from our comfort of our own home. The other important thing when we think about health is be mindful of changes in your health, both mental, emotional, and physical. So be mindful if I'm just not feeling right, or if you have a pain in a certain region, or a recurring pain, or a recurring feeling or disorder. Be mindful of these because you want to get these checked out in any situation. For your car, for example, when that engine light goes on, typically that means there's a problem. Now we can ignore that engine light, and over time, your engine can go bad. And we know what that means. That means thousands of dollars of investment. Oftentimes, if you take the car in right away, it's a much cheaper repair. It's the same for the human body. Get it checked as soon as you can. There's some evidence that men take better care of their cars than of their health. So we really need to be mindful of this piece. When you have certain issues, or if there's certain times when you are supposed to get certain checks, at age 50 is when you get your colonoscopy. Get the colonoscopy at 50. Don't wait for it. Don't wait on it. Get it done based on the medical recommendations. But be mindful of your own health and well-being. Now, the previous presentation talked about vitamins and supplements. Again, I'm not going to go in much detail on this, but I just highlight in here top 10 supplements. There's some evidence that supplements help. There's some evidence that supplements don't really do a whole lot, but typically supplements are inexpensive. I take them just because they're, as I mentioned, they're inexpensive. A good multivitamin is a good thing to take. Calcium, B vitamins, vitamin C out here, glucosamine, chondroitin, good for joints. I talked to a number of runners and triathletes, and they swear by glucosamine, chondroitin. You have vitamin D, fish oil, sports nutrition supplements like creatine, another one that I've heard very good things about from specific athletes that are taking it. So it's a good idea to look into these. Baptist Health, Cleveland Clinic Wellness. There's a host of sites that you can go to that really give you some good detail on some of these supplements. So I encourage you to take a look at some of those. I do want to highlight one. This is a new one. It's a Nicotinamide Mononucleotide, or NMN. It's a newer supplement or substance that is just coming out over the past couple of years, and I'm seeing more and more literature. I would highly recommend checking into this. There's really good evidence coming out of the science community of it's suppressing age-associated weight gain, enhancing energy metabolism, improving insulin sensitivity, prevent age-linked changes in gene expression. I have a reference here as well to an article that talks about this. But this is a good supplement. I would recommend taking a look at it and doing some literature research on this to see if this might work for you. But this one is popular, and there's good research happening on this as we speak. Now, getting back to us and beyond the health piece, I really want to talk about the fountain of youth and stress. As we all know, stress can take a hold of our lives in major ways. It can really take its effect on your well-being, mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So we need to be mindful of this and think about stress and how to manage it. What I always talk about first, though, is not all stress is bad. There is eustress, which is actually positive stress, and there's distress, which is actually negative stress. When I'm working with students and they're about to take a test, they should have a little bit of stress. They should be a little bit anxious. They shouldn't come into that test half asleep. They should have some energy going. That's a good thing. That has the heart pumping, that has blood flowing through the body, blood flowing through the brain. That's going to maximize performance. So it's a good thing to have some stress. When you're exercising, when you're going out jogging or running, you are stressing the heart. You're stressing the muscles. That's a good thing. That's how you build a stronger heart. That's how you build stronger muscles, by stressing them. We need to be mindful, though, when it is going beyond that and it's actually causing distress or harmful stress. And that's the point where we need to be thinking, okay, this is a little bit too much in physical fitness. I'm running too much, or I'm lifting too much. Same in your career. Some stress is good. It's maximizing efficiencies at your job. Deadlines are good. They put a little bit of pressure on you to get something done. But it gets problematic when it gets too much. And at that point where it's too much, that's where we need to be mindful of. I like this quote by Billie Jean King. I think this is a powerful quote. This really says, pressure is a privilege. It only comes to those who earn it. So we always think about pressure being, bad. It's actually a good thing. Watching the Olympics right now, All those athletes have pressure on them, but they earn that pressure. It's a privilege to be where they are. They're ice skating, but they have a lot of pressure on them. That's good pressure though. They've earned it. If you're about to take the LSAT to get into law school, you're going to have pressure on you, but you've earned it. You've completed a 4-year degree. Now you're going for a graduate degree or a medical degree, and MCAT's taking that, or your medical boards, or your bar. That all adds pressure, but think about pressure as a privilege. When we think about the fountain of youth is within the mind, and that's what many of these things really drive towards. I just want to highlight some evidence-based information. Journal of American Medical Association Internal Medicine has published that 60 to 80% of doctor visits are related to stress. 42% of Americans report lying awake at night due to stress. So we can see stress in the body being something that's really affecting us from a medical standpoint and from a psychological standpoint. There's direct research. This study here looked at the duration of life stressors from 0, no stressors, to 24 stressors, or 24 months of stressors, and relative risk of a cold. And what they found was, as the stressors increased in length and time, relative risk of cold increased. So we can see that stress longitudinally causes a problem. So this is where it really becomes important when we are beginning to be stressed. We need to be mindful, how can I eliminate some of this stress? That might mean taking a day off from work. We sometimes don't want to do that, but maybe that's the right thing. Or getting out and taking a walk, or exercising, doing something different, or committing to, once you finish that project, going and doing something fun. So moving away from stress, I want to talk a little bit about the fountain of youth and your spirit. So this is the path on the fountain of youth through the spirit. And what I like to talk about here is really when we think about anxiety. We all know anxiety, it's a negative influence on most every aspect of our health, both mental and physical. Inhibits the immune system, hinders quality of sleep, reduces cognitive function. I just read a recent article that talked about it's typical for people to lie awake at night, stressing over the next day's activities. So we all generally struggle with this. This is the axis of being just anxious about something, thinking about something, we're not able to go to sleep. Anxiety is a big factor when we think about our health and our well-being and longevity. So this is part of the fountain of youth, is understanding anxiety. Now there's different aspects of anxiety and what can affect, what causes anxiety. I just want to focus on one. This was through the Mayo Clinic. Highlighted this through some research, and they really talked about holding a grudge and anxiety. And what they talk about here is, with holding a grudge, you have increased depression, higher blood pressure, weakened immune system, increased anxiety, stress, hostility. It takes up cognitive space. We know when we're holding a grudge, somebody has hurt us and we hold that grudge, we can't get that off our mind sometimes. We think about it. It's taking up cognitive space in our brain. Mayo Clinic has further talked about holding a grudge and forgiveness. And this is coming from the Mayo Clinic. It's a decision to let go of resentment and thoughts of revenge. By letting go of grudges, they show healthier relationships, less anxiety, stress, hostility, lowers your blood pressure, improves your heart health, fewer symptoms of depression. So you can see these physiological changes just by letting go of a grudge. There's one other reason that I want to highlight of why we should think about forgiveness beyond the physical. And I see it in our faith. Our faith requires it of us. So if you're a faith-based person, you want to think about your faith and how it requires us to forgive. Let's take a couple examples. Judaism, from Leviticus, do not hate your brother in your heart. Islam, let them pardon and overlook. Would you not love for Allah to forgive you? Christianity, when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them. And Buddhism, Buddhism really talks about it being an important step on the path towards better life and towards enlightenment. So we see this in our faith of forgiveness. So we see holding a grudge affecting us from a physical standpoint, We see the benefits of forgiveness, and this is through evidence-based through the Mayo Clinic. If you're faith-based, we see it in our faith telling us to do this. So this is another path, piece of the path to the fountain of youth. So I highlight here, consider the value of forgiveness and its importance to your health. So think about the situation, how you reacted, how has it affected your well-being, and actively choose to forgive the person when you're ready. This is not something that you put a date to. It does take time when someone has hurt you, but we really want to think about the value of forgiving. So you may be at a point where you are just having a hard time forgiving somebody, and it can be difficult, but we want to start that path of forgiveness. So that doesn't mean I forgive the person on that day, but it means I'm starting the path to forgiveness, which means I'm thinking about it. How did I react? How has it affected my well-being? And it's a process. And it certainly doesn't mean that you forget the act of however they hurt you. So what I want to just kind of summarize through here is the keys to the fountain of youth. So again, when I think of the fountain of youth, I'm thinking of it being within the mind and in action. And so I think of it as there are keys to the fountain of youth that we want to follow. First, don't accept the ageist stereotype about memory decline. As we get older, we always hear all the evidence about our memory declining, and we don't remember as well, and we're just not as good as this, we're not as fast as that. Listen, our body does decline, but we are still being able to function at pretty much optimum level. There's good evidence that they talk about professional athletes, cyclists, for example, they did a study on. And even though they can't perform at their maximum performance level when they were a professional athlete, they don't see a significant drop off in performance until close to 60. So even to that point where they're maybe riding the Tour de France at optimum level in their 30s, that level is still maintained into their early 60s. Now, it's dropped off just enough that they can't compete professionally, but they're still performing at a very, very top level. So our bodies can still perform at very high levels. In addition, as we get older, we learn techniques and mnemonics of how to remember things. But listen, it is part of the growing process. We do learn to take notes. I have a reminder in my iPad for everything that I do. And every time I think of something that I need to do, I put it in my iPad. If I don't, I'm probably going to forget it. It's just a task. It's something that I've learned through time that I think is beneficial. Positive self-talk and positive self-concept. So positive self-concept is really your thought about how you feel about yourself in certain situations. There's self-efficacy, there's self-concept. Self-concept is typically more domain-specific. So oftentimes I may be very positive in certain domains, but not very positive in other domains. For example, I don't have very high self-concept in my ability to learn a second language. I have tried to learn Italian. I have tried to learn Spanish. I have been unsuccessful. Part of the reason is I just have a low self-concept in my ability to learn another language. I need to change that before I can really learn a language. And I hope to do that in 2022. But thinking about the areas that you may not feel like you're that good at, we want to think about, okay, I may not be the best test taker, but I have studied, I have prepared for this test. I will do fine. I may not get 100%, but I don't need to get 100% to progress through the program. So again, thinking about our skills, thinking about our abilities, highlighting what we believe are our strengths, being aware of our limitations. And that's where it comes into this positive self-talk. I've mentioned this once before. I'm going to mention it again and probably a few more times in here, because if you take anything from this, that is probably the biggest key, is positive self-talk, thinking about when we are talking, when we're thinking in our head about something, ourselves being positive about that. When you look in the mirror and you see yourself and you don't feel like you look good in that outfit, you can have positive self-talk. Then I look good in this outfit. This is a nice outfit. I feel good. And you know what? If I want to feel a little bit better, maybe I'm going to try to exercise or add some exercise to my routine. And I can do that. That is my choice to do that. Positive self-talk, which is very important. I talked a little bit about health. So I always bring up in this talk, be more active. Now, this doesn't mean you have to go run a 5K. Doesn't mean you have to go run a 10K or half marathon. If you are not walking right now, if you're not exercising right now, tonight, take a walk around the block. That's it, a quarter mile. You don't have to do anything big. Exercise is thought of being, it's just doing a little bit more than what you're doing now. That's all it is, just doing a little bit more. So if you're walking a half mile, try to push it to maybe 3/4 of a mile. Just do a little bit more than you're doing now. Don't feel like you have to get out there, buy running shoes and go off and start a running routine. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting just do a little bit more than you're doing now. We always talk about healthy eating and diets. Diet is considered a 4-letter word, terrible. So you know what? Take the word diet out of the picture and just start thinking about it being healthy eating. When you go to the store, just try to pick up foods that are a little healthier. It's okay to have some food in the house that you are that may not be overly healthy because you want to enjoy some foods, but there are plenty of foods that are healthy and taste good. So think about that when you talk about your healthy living. It's not a diet, it's just healthy living. And understand not to beat yourself up if you ever go off and eat something that's unhealthy. I've talked to a number of people that say, gosh, I had a cake last night, or a piece of cake, I feel terrible. You know what? That doesn't mean you've fallen off your diet. That doesn't mean you have stopped your healthy eating. It's okay to have a piece of cake once in a while. I love sweets, so it's okay to have sweets once in a while. I don't have them every day, but I do have them on a recurring basis. That's okay. But be mindful of what you're eating and how you're eating it, but just try to tweak it a little bit to eat a little bit healthier. So again, just like being more active, just try to start eating a little bit healthier than you are today. The Fountain of Youth certainly talks about reducing stress. I've talked about that. We talked about the evidence for stress. This is an important piece, right? There are plenty of stress reducing activities. Taking a walk is a simple something you can do. Meditation, yoga, great activities for reducing stress. And when I think of meditation, don't think of it as being some big arduous task where I have to sit quietly for 20 minutes and do a mantra or just clear my head, because I can never clear my head. There's always something in my head. I can't do that, so I can't do meditation. Well, you know what? Try something simple. Just be mindful for when you're sitting in your car at a stoplight, just for a minute, or if you're at Costco or Publix in a line waiting to check out, just for a minute, just be mindful of your surroundings. And all that is just listening to the people talking around you, listening to the sounds, the smells, anything that's coming into your senses. Just be mindful of them. The air, the breeze, just be mindful of that. If you have a break at work, go out and sit at a bench just for a couple minutes and just listen to the sounds of the environment, the birds, the wind, maybe the water if you're on a lake. Just be mindful of it just for a minute. If you're walking to work, just be mindful of the sounds that you're hearing. While you're mindful of the sounds, what you're actually doing is you're clearing your head of all those other things that are clouding your head. And that's a part of meditation, is just clearing your head. So keep it simple. There are plenty of meditation apps out there you can check out. Headspace is one that I've used. There's plenty of others. I'd recommend checking one of those out, but just at a simplest level, just be mindful for a few moments a day. Positive self-talk, as I mentioned, again, is an important piece of your path to Fountain of Youth. Here's some good information on the power of positive self-talk. There's evidence that it builds confidence, improves your attitude, promotes self-love, helps cope with stress, encourages motivation, helps work through challenges. Oftentimes when we have challenges in our lives, we have a negative viewpoint. Oh boy, this is terrible. I'm never going to get through this. I'm really going to struggle. Well, that only makes it worse, right? We can get through some really difficult challenges. If we all look back at our life at some challenges we've had and have succeeded through them, we can realize that we are capable of great things. We have gotten ourselves through some really difficult times and have survived and have flourished. So for today, I really want you to make a commitment. And I'm asking you to renew or make a commitment to do 4 things to the path of the Fountain of Youth. First, get regular medical checkups, yearly checkups. Whatever age you're at, there are checkups that you need to be getting. You should be getting these every year. It's tracking your health indicators. It's getting baselines of where you're at. This helps physicians better understand your health, helps them recognize signs early on rather than recognizing them late, which can be more problematic. Also, self-checks. Just be very mindful of yourself. Self-reflection. How am I feeling? How are my joints feeling? How did I sleep? My digestion. How are things? How's my heart? Blood pressure and those kinds of things. Heartburn. Am I having some of these issues? Just be very mindful of that and do self-checks. And when you do have these, when you do get your checkups, be sure to bring that up to your physician. Be more active, as I just mentioned. I also want to say mental and physical. So that mental side of it is train your brain, work your brain out. So what I would suggest to everybody is do something new. When we do something over and over again, it's not really generating new neurogenesis. It's not generating new neurons. It's just repeating and strengthening current neurons. So you may be very good at bridge or solitaire. And if you keep playing bridge and solitaire, you're not generating any new neurons in your brain. But if you try something completely new, Hold'em poker, or try a musical instrument, you will start generating new neurons in the brain, because you can do those throughout your life. It's not just during your younger years. A simple thing to do is tonight, brush your teeth with the other hand. If you brush your teeth with your right hand, try with your left hand. I guarantee you're going to find it very different experience. That simple. Maintain a positive self-talk and forgive someone. So in many ways, the Fountain of Youth is a little practice of everything, of all these pieces. It's not being overly active in any, but just little practice of everything. And lastly, I just want to share two stories with you that I've always found interesting and powerful. First, when you read Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, in the book it says it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the season of light, it was a season of darkness. It was a spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. Now in the book, he was really talking about two very different environments, how people were living. But I view it a little bit different, that we can look at our environment and we can see it both ways. This can be a beautiful day, or this can be a terrible day. We have that choice. It could be too cold outside and that's bad, or it can be brisk outside in the morning and it feels good. It's our choice of how to deal with that. Thinking back to Viktor Frankl's comments, are important values to helping that positive self-talk. The last story I want to share with you, because stories are always important, particularly if we're trying to modify our positive self-talk or primarily our positive self-talk, is the story of the farmer and the son. So the farmer and the son were out in their field, plowing the field with their horses, and the two horses got away one night. A neighbor came by and goes, "Oh gosh, what bad news, what bad luck. Your horses ran away. Now you have to plow the field by hand." The farmer said, "Well, good luck, bad luck, who knows?" A week later, the two horses came back and they brought 3 other horses with them. So now the farmer had 5 horses. The neighbor came by again, goes, "Oh, what great news, what good luck. You had 2, now you have 5. The farmer says, "Well, good news, bad news, who knows? Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" A week later, the son was trying to tame one of the horses, and the horse threw the son, and the son broke his arm. The neighbor came by, said, "Gosh, what terrible news, what bad luck. Your son now has a broken arm, he's not going to can't help you in the field." The farmer said the same thing. Good news, bad news, good luck, bad luck, who knows? A month later, the leader, the king in the village, was riding through with his army, recruiting men into his military force to go fight a war. And he didn't take the son because the son had a broken arm. Well, the neighbor came by and goes, "Well, what great news. Since your son had a broken arm, he's not going off to war." Well, the farmer says again, good news, bad news, good luck, bad luck, who knows? So it's really a viewpoint of how we see things. And that's one of the key in my mind of the key to the Fountain of Youth, is it's within our minds. It's between our ears. It's how we process things. You can have a great life. You can have a wonderful life. It's really up to us. The longevity to some degree is up to us, because we see how stress can affect our health, affect our longevity, anxieties as well. These are all things that we do have some control over. And that's where I really think the Fountain of Youth exists. Here's some contact information that I have. I have a website, michaeldedonno.com, and my email address. If you send me an email, I'm happy to share this presentation. Also, from a research standpoint, I've shared much research with you from institutions, academic institutions. FAU has a very robust division of research. We are always trying to develop and create wonderful, wonderful research questions that really help society and our community. If you're ever interested in learning more about that, contact me or contact the Division of Research. Dr. Scarpinato would be happy to chat with you. We are also always looking for resources or individuals that would like to get involved and help us. That could be from a financial standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. If you have skills that may be of value, come on down and give us a call. We'd love to chat with you. We are always in the desire to really build more knowledge and solve the problems within our world today. And with that, I very much appreciate this talk.
Thank you, Michael. And as Dr. DeDonno was saying, if you want to hear more how you can help and assist in our research, please feel free to contact either one of us. We'd love to talk to you, love to hear from you. We also are very interested in any issues and suggestions for projects that you see in the community that you feel research could assist with. So with that, just a reminder, if you have any question for Dr. DeDonno, please write it under the Q&A button in the bottom of the screen. We'll go through those in the remaining time. So Michael, very interesting talks. It's all about choices, right? How we look at things, and everything that happens to us, everything in our environment has two different sides, right? We have a choice to look at it from a positive or a negative standpoint. So very interesting. So here is the first question is about what you would think is more important for the aging process. Are the outside, like looks, skin, or we all age, we get wrinkles and all? Is it the inside, our organs, or is it mentally, our brain capacity, happiness, the emotional piece? Which part of that do you view as most important when you talk about aging?
I think it's, certainly the organs and the mental process really go hand in hand, right? I mean, you can't have, you have to have a healthy body and you have to have a healthy mind. Those two really go hand in hand, in my opinion. Externally, that is really up to the individual. I mean, if it's important to have a youthful look, great. If that's not as important, but really what's important is having low blood pressure and feeling happy and having a high quality of life. That's really where I would focus. So it's specific to the individual, but healthy body, healthy mind, I think are absolutely two things that you can't ignore. And there are always certain things that we can control and certain things that we cannot control, right? Very good point. As you mentioned earlier, our genes are what they are. We're born as we are, but what we expose ourselves to and what we don't take care of or do choose to take care of, those are our choices. So it all comes down to our choices. Very good point. So here's a very interesting question. So you mentioned the Fountain of Youth in St. Augustine, which is a very popular tourist attraction. So one of our listeners has a bottle of Fountain of Youth water and is asking if he or she should be drinking this. Ooh, I don't know where you got that water. If you got it at St. Augustine, I would hope that it's clean water. I don't know if it's going to do anything. I mean, if it makes you feel better when you drink it, I don't think there's any harm to it, as long as you bought it at St. Augustine at a store that was saying that this is drinkable water, because I don't know if the water that you go swimming in there is considered drinkable. Yeah.
So make sure that you ensure that this is drinkable, potable
Yes.
water before you drink it. Okay, coming back to the positive self-talk, which I have found very interesting, especially in the current environment that we're living in, right? We're still in a pandemic and have been for like 2 years now. A lot of issues with mental health that are coming up, loneliness, isolation, more and more. That piece of positive self-talk really important, I think, for any situation, not just while we're in a pandemic. So the question here is, are there any books or is there any reading material that discusses the positive self-talk idea?
Yeah, there's a good number of self-help books that really go into that. In my opinion, sometimes the best way to really improve your self-talk is read books by what I would call overachievers, people who have achieved things that on paper they should never have achieved. Chris Gardner, for example, wrote a book in Pursuit of Happiness. He was a homeless individual lived in a subway in New York, and is now worth millions. He has a wonderful story. I think there's a movie by it, and it's a wonderful story. In one of the books, what I remember was he saying was he would look at himself every day in the mirror and say, in the subway mirror, how did I get here? And he would respond back, I walked here. And his viewpoint was that I didn't want to say that I'm here because of something external forces. I'm here because I walked here, because if I walked here, I can walk out. That's important. Ben Carson, another one. If you look at his history, his mother was, I believe, graduated from 3rd grade. Inner city, he should never have achieved what he did, and look where he was. He ended up being a head of a pediatric neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins. Very successful. He's got a wonderful book. I have not read it, but I've heard Oprah Winfrey stories, very powerful. I think there's just this idea of looking at history and looking at people's experiences. Oh, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, wonderful book. You hear the stories and it really starts putting things in their frame of reference that, I can handle these things. I can handle most anything that happens to me. So when you do think about, gosh, I'm stuck in this pandemic and I'm not able to socialize, I'm not able to go out, but I have Zoom, but I have video, but I can take a walk out and I can stand across the street from my neighbor and we can talk. There are some things that we want to think about. It's how we frame it. But those are the books that I would generally recommend.
And I think all of them have in common that there's always a choice, right? I mean, the choice may not be easy. Don't get me wrong. It may be very, very difficult and a very, very difficult path ahead of you. But in most cases, I would argue you do have a choice. Okay, the supplement you mentioned, I think it's nicotinamide mononucleotide, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that was one of the other questions here. So a more scientific question here that's related to eating, I don't know the answer, is, but maybe you do, Michael. Is FAU offering any study on telomerase or telomere measurements?
I don't, but do you?
No, I don't either. It's actually part of my expertise when I was still a faculty, but I'm not aware that we're actually having that ability here right now. I'd be happy to look into that, though. If the individual who submitted this question wants to contact me directly, I'd be happy to look into that. Okay, you mentioned supplements, Mike. What is your recommendation of the use of bioidentical hormones for women, especially, to lift the quality of life physically and mentally? It says before it was a hidden secret, and it's now more available. And if you have any thoughts on the use of these hormones.
So I don't have any experience with those supplements, but what I would suggest is this, that when you look up the supplement online, you don't want to go to the website for that supplement, obviously, because they're going to really promote it heavily, but go to like Google and type in Scholar, and within Google Scholar, type in that supplement, because then you're going to get research, institutional research on that supplement. I did that for the NMN, for example. That was an institutional research study that looked at it. You really want to look at that data, because sometimes when you go online, you're going to see all this stuff saying this is the cure for everything. Well, where are they getting this evidence? So I don't know that one, but that's what I would suggest. Go on to Google Scholar, PsycInfo, Medline, and just type it in and see what the current research is on it.
I agree with that because you gotta remember a lot of places want to sell you something and they
Yes,
will very
yes.
one-sidedly show information. Okay, I'm going to finish us off, Mike, with one more question, and I'm going to ask you any remaining questions to answer offline. So, any comments on use of rapamycin or metformin in anti-aging?
Oh, again, I don't have, I've not looked
Same
into
answer,
those.
right?
Yeah, so but I would say the same thing to those.
Mhm.
Any experience with anything that you see on the news, anything you see in commercials, go to Google Scholar and look it up in the academic research. You can also reach out to Dr. Scarpin, or I'm happy to even show you online how to do that. But you really want to look at the use of evidence-based research on any supplement that you're interested in.
Yeah, you want to make sure that there are proper controls that
Mhm.
compare the
Yes,
actual effects of what you're looking at, as
yes,
opposed to just somebody trying to sell you something.
very
So,
much so.
yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Mike. I hope we're going to welcome you back another time. This has been always
Good.
very much fun. Thank you very much, everybody, for calling in. Our next Research in Action will be next week, and we're going to talk about whether blood is thicker than seawater.
Oh,
And until then, have a great rest of your week. Good seeing everybody.
good seeing you. Bye.